Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, October 5th, 2023. Memorial service for the late Senator Dianne Feinstein held at City Hall in San Francisco. We'll hear from Vice President Kamala Harris and former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. President Joe Biden is asked why the Homeland Security Department is waiving federal environmental laws to expedite construction of a section of a wall on the U.S. Mexico border. President Biden meets with the new chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Charles C.Q. Brown, and other national security advisors discussing the war in Ukraine, North Korea, Iran, and China. A U.S. fighter jet shoots down a Turkish military drone over Syria that the U.S. said was operating too close to American troops. It's a rare occasion of one NATO member taking military action against another NATO member. We'll get the reaction from the Pentagon Press Secretary. The election of a new House Speaker may be just days away. We asked Congressman Tim Burchett of Tennessee, one of the 8 House Republicans who voted to remove Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who he plans to vote for as a replacement. And the Supreme Court hears a case about whether Americans with Disabilities Act civil rights law tester, who found a hotel violating the law's requirements for posting information about disability access, can sue the hotel for discrimination if that tester had no intent of booking a room there. And now to the memorial service for U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat from California, who passed away last week at the age of 90. Rosalind Baraka, cantor from Congregation Emmanuel, performing. Dianne Feinstein was the first woman mayor of San Francisco, served 1978 through 88, and was U.S. Senator from 1992 until her death. KGO-TV reports that mourners streamed into San Francisco City Hall on Wednesday to pay their respects to the late senator, honoring her as a fearless smart and the glue who kept the city together. After 2 political assassinations that catapulted her into the mayor's office and the national spotlight. Also, this in the report, due to increased security, Thursday's memorial service for Senator Feinstein will no longer be open to the public. San Francisco officials said in a press release Wednesday only invited guests will have access to the service. Here's one of the speakers, Vice President Kamala Harris, who, before she was elected vice president, was a Democratic senator from California.
Some of my fondest recent memories of Dianne are of our time together in a SCIF, a secure meeting room in the United States Senate. Every week, members of the Senate Intelligence Committee would walk into that wood-paneled room, no cameras, no public, no devices. Senators of both parties who would take off their jackets and literally roll up their sleeves, putting aside partisanship to discuss what was in the best interest of our national security. There, we would review classified materials and receive updates from the heads of the CIA, our intelligence community, and the United States military. And God forbid if one of them gave an evasive answer. Dianne, with her trademark grin, would pause, lift up her memo, glance knowingly at the others of us on the dais, and question the witness in a way this former prosecutor always admired. In that room, there was give and take, substantive debate, and problem solving. And that was quintessential Dianne at her best. So as I close, allow me to turn back the clock 30 years to Tuesday, November 3rd, 1992. I was a young prosecutor at the Alameda County District Attorney's Office. And on that evening, I left my home in Oakland, got in my Toyota Corolla, and drove across the Bay Bridge to the city. I pulled into the Fairmont Hotel, and I walked up to a huge and packed ballroom. There on stage stood Dianne and Barbara Boxer, hands raised in what the nation would name the Year of the Woman. We celebrated an historic feat. We were the first state to elect 2 female senators. And that night we celebrated Dianne, who the next day would take office as the first female senator ever for the great state of California. Fast forward to today, when I again traveled to the city to celebrate Dianne, this time from Washington, D.C., on Air Force Two. Dianne, the women of America have come a long way. Our country has come a long way. And you helped move the ball forward, and our nation salutes you, Dianne.
Vice President Kamala Harris, former U.S. Senator from California, Democrat, at the memorial service for the late Senator Dianne Feinstein, also Democrat from California, held today on the steps of City Hall in San Francisco. Another speaker, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California and House Speaker Emerita, who was not only a working companion of Senator Feinstein, but she said a close friend and neighbor.
As neighbors and friends, Dianne and I took pride in working together for California and for our values. I'll always remember this one time in 2015 in the United States Capitol. Dianne and I expressed our concern to President Xi about the Chinese government's abuses of the Tibetans and disrespect for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. When Dianne spoke, people listened. People have asked me, what is the best advice I ever received from Dianne? Well, there's many, we all have gotten great advice from Dianne, but the most constant advice I ever got from her, again and again, was, Nancy, you don't always have to be the one going out on the attack. Let some other people do that from time to time. Why don't you do that? I don't know. Madam Vice President, thank you so much for honoring us with your presence today and honoring Dianne, your good friend, and again, official associate. It's an honor that you are here. Leader Schumer, you have spoken so beautifully about Dianne, our senator's accomplishments. Thank you. Thank you for your beautiful remarks the morning of her passing and all that you have done since then to honor her memory. And she has a lasting legacy. From the cable cars, the breast cancer stamp, to the assault weapons ban, to Team Tahoe. Any Team Tahoes here? Team Tahoe. The list goes on and on, from the U.S. Capitol back to San Francisco, where Dianne Feinstein is our forever mayor. Forever mayor. Dianne was such a commanding mayor for 10 powerful years that when her term was up and some other people started to run for mayor, including some men, school children were saying, can a man be mayor of San Francisco?
Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, today's memorial service for the late Senator Dianne Feinstein. Many of the speakers were interrupted by, they said, the Blue Angels flying overhead. One noted that it was Fleet Week in San Francisco. Some other speakers today included the mayor of San Francisco, Democrat London Breed, and Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, a Democrat, Eileen Mariano, granddaughter of Senator Feinstein, and in a recorded message, President Joe Biden. And performing the San Francisco Girls Chorus. Dianne Feinstein will be buried at a private, family-owned only ceremony. And you can find today's memorial service at our video library at cspan.org. This is Washington Today. From Associated Press, the Biden administration announced on Wednesday that it had waived 26 federal laws in South Texas to allow border wall construction, marking the administration's first use of a sweeping executive power employed often during the Trump presidency. The The Department of Homeland Security posted the announcement on the U.S. Federal Register with few details outlining the construction in Starr County, Texas, which is part of a busy Border Patrol sector seeing, quote, high illegal entry. According to government data, about 245,000 illegal entries have been recorded in this region during the current fiscal year. And Alejandro Mayorkas, the Homeland Security Secretary, stated in the notice, there is presently an acute and immediate need to construct physical barriers and roads in the vicinity of the border of the United States in order to prevent unlawful entries into the U.S. in the project areas. That reporting from Associated Press. President Biden was asked about this today.
I'll answer one question on the border wall. The border wall, the money was appropriated for the border wall. I tried to get them to reappropriate, to redirect that money. They didn't. They wouldn't. And in the meantime, there's nothing under the law other than they have to use the money for what it was appropriated. I can't stop that.
Do you believe the border wall works?
No. Okay, thank you.
President Biden in the White House Oval Office, it was a question he took from reporters at the end of an event on a different issue dealing with national security and dealing with meeting with his foreign affairs and national security team, and not specifically immigration. Former President Donald Trump, 2024 presidential candidate, and a posting on Truth Social. So interesting to watch crooked Joe Biden break every environmental law in the book to prove that I was right when I built 560 miles. They incorrectly state 450 in the story, a brand new, beautiful border wall. Former President Trump goes on in his post, as I have stated often, over thousands of years, there are only two things that have consistently worked, wheels and walls. Will Joe Biden apologize to me and America for taking so long to get moving and allowing our country to be flooded with 15 million illegal immigrants from places unknown? I will await his apology. That was the post from Donald Trump. The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre also taking reporters' questions today about this topic at her own news conference.
This is something that we were required by law, and we are complying. This is an administration that does believe in the rule of law.
But why now? For instance, these funds have been available since Biden took office. Why at this time?
And the president actually spoke to this, and this is one of the things that he was saying, that he's been asking Congress to reappropriate the funds. He has been. For the past couple of years, and Congress refused. And we have to comply by law to get this done, and that's what you're seeing happening right now.
Would there be a way to continue to slow walk this and to delay it?
We have to comply by law, and that's what we're doing at this time. We ask Congress to reappropriate the funds. That's what we would prefer to see, not waste the funding in the way that they're doing it right now, that we are required to do. But they refused, and so now we're moving forward. Okay.
Thanks, Karine. What specific law would the administration be breaking if funds appropriated for the border wall are not used, especially because the funds go unused all the time? And why not let it go unused this time?
Well, look, I'm not going to speak to the law. I would have to refer you to Department of Justice. I'm not a lawyer, but what I can tell you is that this is a law that we are complying with. We have asked Congress multiple times to reappropriate this. This is not the way that we believe is going to be effective here. We believe in modernizing the system, not actually building a wall. The president said himself he does not think this is effective, and so we're complying by law. And we believe that in the rule of law here, and we're moving forward and getting that, in following the law.
Is this the administration in some ways recognizing that using these funds at this moment will be useful in Texas?
We are complying by the law that says that we need to do this, and that's what DHS is asking for.
And how is this consistent with what President Biden pledged to do when he was elected, which is that he will not use any funds to use the border law? What will let's
make this really clear. The facts are that this is not new, right? This is something that came from the last administration under the Republican leadership in fiscal year 2019, and we are required to do this. We are required, DHS is required to comply by the law. That's what we're doing here. And look, the president, he said this himself. He basically asked Congress to reappropriate the funds. They wouldn't do it. And so now we have to comply by the law. Now, this was something that was announced 6 months ago. DHS actually announced this 6 months ago. And so this is not new. This is actually not new.
The White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre at her news conference in the White House briefing room. Again, from Associated Press, environmental advocates say structures will run through public lands, habitats of endangered plants and animal species like the ocelot, a spotted wild cat. Lycan Jordahl, a Southwest conservation advocate for the Center for Biological Diversity, said Wednesday afternoon a plan to build a wall through will bulldoze an impermeable barrier straight through the heart of that habitat. It will stop wildlife migrations dead in their tracks. It will destroy a huge amount of wildlife refuge land, and it's a horrific step backwards for the borderlands. That from AP. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina, was asked about this in an interview on the John Fredericks radio show on Real America's Voice Network.
How is the Biden White House going to spin this to their base that they're suspending 26 environmental laws in order to put this up ASAP? Like, what is the possible spin here?
Well, they're going to have to spend because they've got environmentalists on their side of the aisle that are going to be enraged by this. They're going to have Democrats that want illegals to vote in our elections enraged by this. They want to ruin our country with their border policies. And now Biden sees the writing on the wall and they have to put a stop to it, or at least hit pause and improve the border situation right now. And thank God for Governor Abbott, because he has been leading on this issue, trying every kind of technology that they can to stop the flow of illegals into the state of Texas. That's what the federal government should be doing. And I'm glad they're going to do a 20-mile long wall, but they need to do the entire border. We need to shut it down, because the only way we can solve our border crisis is to shut down our southern border.
Congresswoman Nancy Mace, Republican from South Carolina, on the John Fredericks radio show via Real America's Voice Network. Julian Castro, former HUD secretary, was on MSNBC.
I mean, it looks like this is a promise broken. There's no easy way to describe this other than a flip-flop from President Biden. He said in the 2020 campaign that he would not build another foot of Trump's border wall, that it was a waste of money, didn't make any sense. And here we have the Department of Homeland Security saying they're going to waive 26 federal laws to build more wall more quickly. And one of two things is happening, I think. Either the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. And earlier on the program, you read a press release by DHS that is different from what the White House is saying. So that's possible. Or I think more likely, this is responsive to the pressure, especially the attacks from Republicans that Biden has gotten, that I think he and his team are probably afraid is making him seem too soft on immigration. And so they're taking a political gamble here. And the gamble is that by basically what they think of as moving to the middle on immigration and seeming harsher on it, that they're going to gain more votes in 2024 than they'll lose from unenthusiastic progressives or allies who believe in a better asylum system and want to hold him accountable for what he said he would do on immigration, which is different from what he's doing. So that's the political gamble. It's a risky gamble.
Julian Castro is a former Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, former mayor of San Antonio, Texas, and former Democratic presidential candidate. Today on MSNBC. On Wall Street, the Dow down 9, NASDAQ down 16, S&P down 5. President Biden met today with national security advisors in the White House Oval Office, including Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, the CIA Director William Burns, John Feiner, Principal Deputy National Security Advisor, and General Charles C.Q. Brown, the new chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
Well, General Brown, welcome to the Oval as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. It's great to have you here. And your experience in combat and your experience in administering at the Defense Department, and your leadership in just about every theater. You've been around the world, as they say, as a commander. And you're a trusted leader of the Joint Force, and you're accelerating the change we need, both in terms of material and in terms of strategies. And CQ, your insight and counsel, we're looking for. The Secretary of Defense has been bragging about you a long time here. And so is the head of the CIA, so we're going to get going. And today we're going to discuss the intelligence matters that are current. You know, you've kept current on all of these, I know. But we're going to discuss Ukraine, Iran, DPRK, and also our continued enhancement of stability of the Indo-Pacific in that whole area. So anyway, there's a lot we have to do, and I just wanted to welcome you. Thank you for being here. That's why we let the press in here for this. We don't have it for the PDB. But, welcome. Okay, guys.
Mr. President,
President Biden in the White House Oval Office with General Charles C.Q. Brown, who just took over as chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff last weekend, and other top national security advisors. The president said that Ukraine would be one of the subjects they discuss. The president has requested that Congress approve $24 billion in new U.S. aid to Ukraine, military, humanitarian, and economic, as Ukraine continues fighting off Russia's invasion. Whether that funding will pass the Republican-controlled U.S. House is uncertain, especially since they just vacated the Speaker's chair and they need to elect a new Speaker, perhaps next week. Associated Press reporting that at least 49 civilians were killed Thursday in a Russian rocket strike on a village store in eastern Ukraine, one of the deadliest attacks in recent months that came as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky attended a summit of around 50 European leaders in Spain to drum up support from the country's allies. Story from CBS News: a U.S. F-16 fighter jet shot down an armed Turkish drone that was operating near American troops in Syria Thursday after several warnings, according to U.S. officials. The shootdown came after repeated communications to stay away from U.S. ground troops in northeastern Syria. This is believed to be the first time the U.S. has shot down a drone from Turkey, which is a NATO ally. There are about 900 U.S. troops operating in Syria as part of the mission to defeat ISIS. That was from CBS News. More on this from the Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder.
You said the Secretary spoke to his Turkish counterpart about the shoot down of the Turkish drone. How concerned was the Secretary that these troops were put at risk, and that despite multiple attempts to, I guess, deconflict and get U.S. troops out of danger, it still had to come to this?
Yeah, so first of all, just a little context up front. Turkey is one of our strongest and most valued NATO allies, and that partnership continues and will continue. So this is certainly a regrettable incident. At approximately 7:30 local time in Syria today, our forces had observed UAVs conducting airstrikes in the vicinity of Hasaka, Syria. Some of those strikes were inside a declared U.S. restricted operating zone, or ROZ, near Hasaka, and were approximately a kilometer away from U.S. forces who relocated to bunkers. At approximately 11:30 local time, a Turkish UAV re-entered the ROZ on a heading toward where U.S. forces were located. U.S. commanders assessed that the UAV, which was now less than a half a kilometer from U.S. forces, to be a potential threat, and U.S. F-16 fighters subsequently shot down the UAV in self-defense at approximately 11:40 local time. It's important to point out that no U.S. forces were injured during the incident. We have no indication that Turkey was intentionally targeting U.S. forces. And as I mentioned, the Secretary did talk to his Turkish counterpart and reaffirmed our commitment to continue to closely coordinate.
How striking is it that, Turkey is a NATO ally, and is this the first time that you can recall that a NATO ally has had to shoot down the aircraft of another NATO partner?
Yeah, I think, again, it's a regrettable incident, but U.S. commanders on the ground did assess that there was a potential threat, and so they took prudent action in this scenario. But again, the Secretary has talked to his counterpart. They had the opportunity to have a fruitful conversation and again commit to one another that the U.S. and Turkey will continue to closely communicate and coordinate. And as I mentioned, Turkey does remain a very important and valuable NATO ally and partner to the United States.
The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, also an Air Force Brigadier General, today in the Pentagon briefing room with reporters. Reuters reports that the incident comes at a delicate moment for U.S.-Turkish relations, with the United States hoping Turkey will ratify NATO membership for Sweden. And U.S. support for Kurdish forces in northern Syria has long caused tension with Turkey. which views them as a wing of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, PKK. That group claimed responsibility for Sunday's attack in Ankara near government buildings. Former U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton today presented the Hillary Rodham Clinton Awards at the Georgetown Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. The Institute's website reads that the awards are bestowed annually for exceptional leadership in promoting women's rights and creating a more peaceful and secure world for all. This year's honorees are CNN journalist Christiane Amanpour and activists from Sudan, Yemen, and Syria. Here is Hillary Clinton.
It's no surprise that the drive to diminish women's rights is actually linked to the quest for political power. Many leaders use women as a reason for pulling back on rights, use women's lives and aspirations as a challenge rather than an opportunity to existing power structures. And these forces that are at work around the world have created perilous times for everything that we have held dear and that we believe in can make a better world for everybody, women and men. You know, people from all walks of life are mounting a massive resistance to autocracy, to the oppression of women and girls, to irresponsible big tech companies whose platforms are absolutely rife with misogyny and sexism and viral attacks on women in the public sphere. So we're trying to tell a different story, a different narrative for the future by not only standing up for democracy, human rights, and progress, but highlighting women who are doing it in their lives every single day, like these incredible women who you will hear from in a minute. You know, protecting and promoting a free press is critical to all of us, to our democracy, our sense of security and freedom, and it's imperative that we have women's perspectives in journalism, just as we must have in national security and diplomacy. We need to hear stories about what's actually happening in people's real lives. We need to hear what happens to women in repressive places like Afghanistan and Iran, whose rights are being either totally denied or shrunken. We need to hear the stories, sometimes hard to listen to, of women in Ukraine where Russia is using rape as a tactic of war. We need to hear the stories here in the United States where maternal mortality is higher than in any advanced country in the world. We don't take care of mothers. We do not take care of children the way that we should. Now, I think it's important to recognize that women should not be characterized as victims. I reject that at every turn. Women are agents of change, and women's stories are powerful reminders of what is possible.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton today at the 2023 Hillary Rodham Clinton Awards at Georgetown University's Institute for Women, Peace, and Security. She has presented the awards since 2014. Washington Today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source on C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, which you can get as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you find your podcasts. The U.S. House and U.S. Senate not in session today or tomorrow. Senate's out for senators to be able to attend the memorial service for the late Senator Dianne Feinstein in California. House not in because there is no speaker. And the Speaker pro tem, Patrick McHenry, Republican from North Carolina, has said the election of a new speaker will not happen until at least midweek next week. Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee, one of the 8 House Republicans who joined all House Democrats this past Tuesday to remove Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican of California, from the speakership, was interviewed on C-SPAN this morning, and he was asked about who he would like to be the next speaker.
is your candidate for Speaker next week when this vote takes place?
I don't have one, but I'm not as worried about that as a lot of people are. We've got a very deep bench. We've got a lot of people that could serve in that position. Steve Scalise, Roger Williams out of Texas, Jody Arrington out of Texas, Kevin Hearn, Jim Jordan. I even asked Elise Stefanik if she'd be interested, but she's not interested at this time. And there's some others that could do it as well. So I'm not as worried about that, but I believe they understand the urgency of our fiscal ship. We're taking in $5 trillion a year and spending $7 trillion. I don't care who's in the White House. That's wrong. As you know, our credit rating was recently knocked down a notch, and that's only happened. That's the second time I think that's happened. And they said the reason was leadership, maturity in the leadership, and two was fiscal responsibility. And they said that's over the last 20 years. So that cuts both ways. That's both parties.
All right. Then,
so
other than spending, sir, what is your criteria for the next speaker to get your vote?
I think they need to have I know it sounds kind of trendy, but I do need to have a vision of where this country's going. And it's not, let's put 4 proposals up on the wall and see which one can get the most votes. That's not principled, and that's not smart, and that's not what our country needs. We need someone who understands the game and is not afraid to go negotiate. You know, we weeks without talking to the President of the United States. You know, if I was Speaker of the House, I don't care if it was the devil himself or herself. I don't want to be sexist, but I'd be at the White House every day talking about issues. I would open up those channels. I'd go talk to Chuck Schumer every day. I would be on the phone with him every day talking about things, where we need to be, what we're trying to do. And I would open up those channels of communication, man. I think that's a vital, punching them in the nose on the 6 o'clock news or on Twitter or whatever, to me is it's good for clickbaits, it's good for raising money, but it's not the way to govern.
Does your candidate need to allow only one of you to offer a motion to vacate the speakership? I've
been asked that as of late, but I'm not really concerned about that. That was the law until Speaker Pelosi took it out. It had been there since the 20s. And so that doesn't really bother me that much. All it says is that you get a motion to vacate, you just take a vote. And then if you up or down, and that's kind of the way it goes. So that's democracy. And that's in the rules, and it served us well since the 20s until Speaker Pelosi took it out. But if the conference wants to do it, that's not a beach I'm going to die on.
Congressman Tim Burchett, Republican from Tennessee, on C-SPAN's Washington Journal this morning. He was one of the 8 House Republicans who voted this week to remove Speaker Kevin McCarthy. There are 2 Republican candidates who have announced for Speaker so far, Jim Jordan of Ohio and Steve Scalise from Louisiana. Congressman Jordan was interviewed this morning on the Fox News Channel.
You were on the fence the night of the ouster. What changed your mind to say, I want to be Speaker?
You need someone who can unite the conference, and I think just as importantly, unite the conservative and Republican movement across this country. That's what I think I can do. That's why I'm running for the job. I like the job I had. Chairman of the Judiciary Committee, chairman of the Select Committee on the Weaponization of Government, doing the work there. But I do think we have to have someone who can bring our team together. I think I'm best equipped to do that. The 8 people who voted in a way that I disagreed with, we got to bring them into the fold. I think I'm best equipped to do that so that we can then go do the things we told the American people we would do for them. And the first thing I would focus on, the very first thing I would focus on is one sentence: no money can be used to process or release into this country any new migrants. You have to change the equation. You have to stop what's going on there in Texas and across our country. That is the first bill we should do. Attach that to a spending bill and get that done for the America. And everyone knows this is the central issue. Eric Adams, the mayor of New York, is in Latin America as we speak because this problem is so big. We need to address that. We need to get the Democrats on board to do what their constituents want them to do as well.
Congressman Jim Jordan, Republican from Ohio, candidate for U.S. House Speaker, today on Fox News Channel. Congressman Andy Barr, Republican from Kentucky, says that he supports the other announced candidate for Speaker, Steve Scalise of Louisiana, the current majority leader. Congressman Barr was interviewed by Fox Business Channel today.
I support Steve Scalise for Speaker. I spoke with Jim Jordan last night, and I have tremendous respect for Jim. He's doing a great job as chairman of the Judiciary Committee, focusing on oversight of the Biden administration's weaponization of government. But we need, as we can all see, we need a unity right now. We need someone who is a uniter, and Steve Scalise is the uniter in our conference right now, someone who has a proven record of bringing our conference together. He is a trusted conservative. As the majority whip, he was consistent in bringing together 218 votes. As our majority leader, he has transformed a conservative agenda into legislative action through regular order with member input. Nobody knows every member of this conference better than Steve Scalise.
Okay.
And as I said before, last week was a very disappointing week for our conference. It's a critical moment in our majority, and we need someone who can unite the conference. That's Steve Scalise, in my judgment.
Where do these investigations stand in terms of the investigation into the weaponization of federal government, in terms of the investigation into the Biden family influence peddling? And then, of course, you've got all of those bills to finish by November 17th. What is the odd? What are the odds that you can do that and not have the government shut down again on November 17th?
Well, this is the problem. The problem with the misguided tactics of a few members last week was that we can't act right now. We can't act on anything. We can't, if the goal was to reduce spending, we can't move conservative appropriations bills that cut spending. We can't continue the critical oversight of the Biden administration. We can't continue the investigation into the weaponization of government. We can't continue impeachment inquiries. We can't even move a border security bill.
Congressman Andy Barr, Republican from Kentucky, today on Fox Business Channel. Politico's Rachel Bate has an article on the race for Speaker, calling Congressman Scalise the heir apparent and Congressman Jordan the dark horse. And at the end, there's a section titled One Crazy Idea that reads, given the conflicting dynamics in the House Republican Conference, it's entirely possible that neither man gets 218 votes. If that happens, some Republicans have already whispered about whether we might see some sort of deal cut between Scalise and Jordan that could enable them to run as a slate. Under such an idea, Scalise would become Speaker, looking out for the more establishment and frontline members, and Jordan would become Majority Leader to give leadership's decisions credibility with the hard right. To be sure, goes on this article from Politico, neither camp is talking about this at the moment, but the idea has actually come up before. When Kevin McCarthy has sought to climb the ladder in the past, conservatives made a similar pitch in return for support, but back then, given Jordan's poor reputation with the conference, McCarthy refused. House Democrats are expected next week to nominate Hakeem Jeffries of New York for Speaker. He's the current minority leader, and it'll be unchallenged, just as they did last January when the Speaker's race happened then. But since the Democrats are not in the majority of the House, it's very unlikely he's going to win and become Speaker. Congressman Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, posted this video on Wednesday.
There's a lot of chaos these days on Capitol Hill, and when I talk to people, there is anger that we aren't addressing their real issues, whether it is the cost of gas, the cost of groceries, the cost of rent or buying houses, the fact that wages aren't going up as fast as they should. Kevin McCarthy simply was not able to lead. That's why he was removed. But there needs to be much broader reform to fix this place and put the American people first. First, we need to ban all PAC and lobbyist money from corrupting Washington. Second, we need to ban members of Congress from going and becoming lobbyists. Third, ban members of Congress from stock trading. Fourth, ban members of Congress for staying here for life, have term limits and ethics standards for Supreme Court justices. That's what's really going to bring change in this place. And we need some provision so a small minority of 8 people, 5 people, can't hold hostage the entire country demanding cuts for working class and middle class Americans for programs that benefit them. We need reform in this institution.
Congressman Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, in a video. And the House is back next Tuesday as the Republicans will be meeting in closed session to hear presentations from those who want to run for Speaker. And we expect on Wednesday they'll actually be taking a vote. We'll have all the coverage we can on the C-SPAN networks, whatever's in public. From a Fox News article today, several House Republicans in a key bipartisan group have said they could soon see a mass exodus over their Democratic counterparts' role in Speaker Kevin McCarthy's ouster this week. Congresswoman Nicole Maliotakis, Republican of New York, told Fox News Digital, "I'm really thinking strongly about leaving the Problem Solvers Caucus. I think there's a lot of Republicans who are disenchanted with the Democratic members of that caucus." The Supreme Court, writes NBC News, grappled Wednesday with whether a disability rights campaigner can sue hotels for failing to disclose accessibility information if she doesn't plan to actually book a room. The case involving activist Deborah Loeffler could curtail the ability of testers to bring lawsuits to benefit the disabled community as a whole by ensuring hotels comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act, known as the ADA. Atchison Hotels lawyers noted in court filings that Loeffler has filed more than 600 lawsuits targeting small hotels and bed and breakfast. Litigation costs can be substantial for small businesses facing such claims, they said. During the oral argument, some justices appeared skeptical that Loeffler faced discrimination just from searching online to see whether a hotel listed accessibility information. That was from NBC News. Here's part of the oral argument with Justice Sonia Sotomayor questioning Adam Unikowski, an attorney for Atchison Hotels.
When people travel, or at least when I do, and I think I'm not abnormal in this sense, I look at a place, I look at various sites to decide where I want to stay. I look at price points, I look at the level of accessibility, whatever, all right? So what you're saying is that there's no stigmatic harm to a disabled person in their ability to do what I do. Look at a place and say, I may want to visit Venice, I may want to visit Florida, I may want to visit California, and I want information about all the sites there so I can decide what suits me best. And you're saying you need something much more concrete than that? So I've been deprived of my ability to make an informed choice about where to visit, and I'm not harmed stigmatically?
Well, so it seems to me that if the person is traveling and is checking a few hotels and is trying to decide where to stay, but the person's planning to travel, then I think that there would be standing. Like if you're saying, I want to go to Ocean City and I'm looking at 2 or 3 hotels, not sure which one to stay at.
But the person who says, I want to find the place to visit, Ocean City, Atlantic City, whatever other city, and now I'm doing my investigation of all 3 cities, and I decide against your city because I couldn't find enough accessible places, I'm not harmed?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think that if you have no idea where you're going to go and you're just going to a hotel website for some randomly picked hotel in the city and see it's not accessible, but you don't have
why aren't I don't understand. Discrimination, I thought, meant that I'm being treated differently than other people. If I go on a drive to a place and there's a sign up that says, no disabled person is welcomed, I've been discriminated against, correct?
Yes.
What's different than my going to a website and the website saying nothing about disability, so I know I'm not welcome there?
Well, Your Honor, if you see the sign that says no disabled people welcome, I actually don't think they're standing unless you want to enter the business. So if you're on the internet and you see a sign of some business.
So it's just so in the people who used to go to lunch counters and wanted to just sit down, they didn't necessarily want to try the food there.
No.
Those people weren't discriminated against?
No, they were definitely discriminated against because they were prevented from sitting at the lunch counter.
Adam Unikowski, attorney for Atchison Hotels, being questioned by Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor in the case Atchison Hotels, LLC v. Loeffler. Justice Brett Kavanaugh asked the attorney for Deborah Laufer, and that attorney is Kelsey Corcoran, about standing, the right to sue in these types of cases.
Some of the amicus briefs raise the concern that everyone throughout the United States can sue every inn and hotel throughout the United States and use the phrase, I'm not saying I agree with this, but this is the phrase in the amicus brief, online version of offended observers. And so I want you to respond to that. Is that ultimately the effect of your position? Not saying that means your position's wrong, but is that the effect of your position?
No, it isn't, and I think this goes back to our discussion about Allen v. Wright. Here, a disabled plaintiff is asserting a private right to equal treatment, and the cause of action is for individuals who have experienced a violation of that private right. So one, you don't have a cause of action under Title III unless—
Put aside cause of action. This is about
right.
standing.
You have to be both disabled so that you're actually experiencing a discriminatory denial of information, and you have to have encountered the discrimination.
So
you can't just hear about it.
I think some of the amicus briefs also refer to, then, could every disabled person throughout the United States sue every inn and hotel throughout the United States? Again, not saying that means your position's wrong, but following up, I guess, on Justice Gorsuch, I'm trying to figure out where that leads.
I think any disabled person who goes to the website, whether they make a reservation under the government's rule, but they're engaging with it and confronting the accessibility barrier, would have experienced a violation of their private right under Title III. But that's not an extension of Article III standing. That's just an application of traditional Article III principles to the digital realm. It's just everyone's reach has been expanded, for better or worse.
Right, and I think the interesting, difficult question in this case, maybe on the standing side, is do you actually experience discrimination when you go to the website and you can get all the same information anyone else can get, but you're experiencing discrimination because what would happen if you went to the hotel?
Well, so I don't think it's the discrimination is what would happen if you went to the hotel. The discrimination is, we say in our brief, it's as if you went up to a reservation desk in a wheelchair, and the hotel had a practice of just ignoring anyone in a wheelchair or telling them to call a number. There is a dignity harm in being treated as invisible and not as a potential participant in the marketplace.
So someone who didn't go on the website but was aware of this
would not have experienced
it's the website that's, in your view, creating the discrimination.
Yeah.
Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh questioning Kelsey Corcoran, who is Supreme Court Director at Georgetown Law School's Institute for Constitutional Advocacy and Protection and an attorney for Deborah Laufer in the case Atchison Hotels v. Laufer, oral argument from Wednesday. And you can find the full audio, it's just audio at this point from the Supreme Court, of this oral argument at our website, cspan.org. Returning to the NBC News article about the case, there's this paragraph, lurking in the background is another legal question about whether the Supreme Court should even decide the case, in part because Deborah Laufer has withdrawn her lawsuit and the ownership of the hotel in question has changed. It was unclear whether the justices would take that approach, which would leave the broader legal issue unresolved. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's free evening newsletter, word for word, to get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.